Great. Welcome to Governing Board on June 25th. It is 6:30. Glad to see some of you in the audience. All right, roll call. Mrs. Hahn?
Tori Anderson.
Present.
Patty Trey.
Present.
Scott Bortle. Present. Leslie Carlin Burnett.
Here.
Anna Marie Moore.
Present.
All right, thank you. That brings us to our Pledge of Allegiance. Mary Grace and Henry Wade are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to adoption of the agenda, and I do have a couple of items to take off, if you'll indulge me for a minute. Items 7E and F. I would like to pull those off the agenda and requesting additional information. We're not under a timeline on that, so I'm asking for additional information if that's okay with the board. Any other changes in agenda? No? Okay, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, that brings us all the way down to our call to the public. I do have 2 speaker cards. If there are, obviously we have such a huge audience right now. It is summer, we can tell. Just remember that to try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38431, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for a future agenda. The board requests that all comments be limited to 3 minutes or less, and that the public refrain from any use of speech or language that is offensive or inappropriate pursuant to board policy KFA. So if you'll just please state your name when you come up. I have Joshua Judd first. Well, I just stated your name for you, so. And you're speaking for someone else too, Joshua?
Yes.
Okay.
6 minutes, if I can. Good evening, Dr. Chestnut, members of the board.
Can you take that off?
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeff Kramarczyk has a message for you and for those in attendance concerning our progress for the override campaign. He is the chair of that committee and just wanted to share this information with you. The last 4 weeks have seen great activity in regards to the strategic planning of an override campaign. The following are some highlights. Formation of a leadership committee has been completed. The committee is comprised of 5 members and is tasked with defining the end-to-end strategic plan for the override campaign. The strategic plan will focus on 3 main areas: campaign funding and budget, volunteer coordination, public relations, marketing, and messaging. The target date for completion of the plan is July 28th, 2014. High-level project timeline has been completed. Campaign volunteer support estimates, right now we have approximately 40 core members that are pretty much committed to helping this along, and the goal for secondary support members would be about 400. So it's a big number, but we're actually, based on our initial feelers out there, we're pretty confident that we can get there. Initial funding of $2,500 has been approved, pending MUSD board decision and final campaign budget presentation. The bottom line is that we have made great steps in lining up the critical elements and manpower to lead a successful campaign. If you, the board, choose to place an override proposal on the ballot, we are confident that this momentum will continue to build as the weeks and months progress towards the election. Sincerely, Jeff Kramarczyk. It looks very positive from everything, and I know that, you know, it's easy. You can be rosy when you're directly involved with it. But by all things, especially taking into account the survey that was conducted, the initial response from us just feeling out how dedicated to this cause people will be, everything looks very positive. So I would love to see a vote in the affirmative tonight that will allow us a little bit more time before the election, and every week counts. So I'm hoping that you guys can vote in the affirmative this evening for an override. Thank you so much. And see, only in 3 minutes for 2 people. Look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. I appreciate it. Henry Wade.
Does this one work, though? No.
The handheld one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Henry Wade, 42581 West Shemile Drive, Maricopa, Arizona, and members of the board. I come before you today as well to ask that you move forward with the override. I am as optimistic as the previous speaker. However, I'm realistic about the community that we're in and what we have to deal with. And by that, I mean our community has rejected us on a number of occasions. And I'm hopeful, prayerful, that they will not do that to us again. Unfortunately, the way things are trending here in terms of some decisions that were made by the City Council here recently and some comments that have been made by City Council candidates also giving the impression that there may be some other funds that might be utilized for other options that we may have available as a community. This tax the community, and it scares the community. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to present this override in such a way that they will not be afraid to move forward to support their children. And as I shared with you earlier, my last time I was here, I don't have any children in the school district. However, I think it is critically important to support the children here because if we don't, and I tied it that last evening to economic development, if we don't do that, then we are setting ourselves up to stay and remain in a stagnant economy here in Maricopa. People are not interested in coming to a community that's not progressive, that doesn't have a feeling of support for the entire community, the children as well. So one of the things I would like to see, and I'm hopeful that as we move forward and we move forward as a community, I'd like to see some working together between the different factions that might exist. And by factions, I mean types of organizations that support education, parochial, private, public, homeschooling. I'd like to see some type of group dynamics in that so that we can work towards what it is that we're working towards, and that's the children, the proper education of those children, which of course helps us. So I'm hoping that you move forward with some of those things in mind, that this is just, it's not just about dollars and cents, and anyone who believes it's just about dollars and cents is short-sighted. Anyone that believes that we can't support our children and support our community at the same time, I think is short-sighted as well. So please move forward with the override. I'm going to stand there with you and be there with you. If it costs me, it costs me, but I believe that it's important enough for me to stand there and be there with you. So I will. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. That's the end of my speaker cards. There is still time for anybody else who would like to address the board during call to the public. All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Superintendent's report, Dr. Chestnut.
President Anderson, members of the board, I have a few slides tonight. Not too many. A few things to report on. I just got this picture, and it's a pretty great picture. On May 14th, Principal Jen Robinson had an opportunity to meet with Secretary Arnie Duncan, U.S. Secretary of Education, and it was a meeting here in Phoenix with a group of about 12 principals who are on the cutting edge of developing teacher leaders in their schools and districts. And of course, we are really on the cutting edge of that with our grant from that we just recently received to create our master teachers at the secondary level, our mentor teachers, and from the Arizona K-12 Center. And Dr. Robinson serves on the board of that organization. She's highly involved. And then in addition to that, she works with candidates who are pursuing national board certification. As you know, she is one of our national board certified teachers, as well as being an administrator, a principal, and is very highly regarded in our state. So it was really quite an honor for her to be in that meeting and share in conversation with the secretary. And I actually was in a meeting one time with him, but there was like 50 people, and I never even got a picture. So I'm really very jealous of her for being able to do that. So that was a great accomplishment, or a great thing for her to participate in. I want to report that we had our monthly meeting with city manager and staff. Mr. Roush, Mr. Beckett, and I met with them. We continued to do that. We talked about the IGA, and we have a meeting scheduled, I believe it's on July 13th, to really get down to the details of the IGA. We kind of thought we were going to get a sample copy ahead of time, and they said they want to bring it to the meeting and talk about it with us in person, which is fine. So we'll keep you posted on progress of that document. On the 19th, I attended my MEDA board meeting, the Maricopa Economic Development Alliance, and it's a pleasure to be involved with that group. business leaders in our community that understand the importance of strong public education. And kind of just going back to the comments made earlier, if you recall the press release that they put out, the executive summary of the survey, they recommended that the governing board consider an override. And they understand the need for improving our educational system, and that's the reason they invested in the survey, which gave us a good baseline of perceptions in our community. And I think that group is very understanding of the need for an override, as one example of things that they're interested in. This picture was taken yesterday of the Maricopa High School Stadium field turf warranty replacement project, which is a big project. And the picture isn't the greatest, but you can see emerging in the middle of the field, actually those guys were working on this yesterday, is a large M, symbol of Maricopa High School. It's going to really set that field off nicely. We didn't have a center logo before. That's going to be great. You can see there are no numbers on the field. We got a cut rate for doing that. So, no, I'm just kidding. We will have numbers. They're going to do that, and they're working on those numbers right now. And Mr. Roush has been down there kind of supervising those guys, and we were surprised to learn that, you know, they roll it out. It's all green. There's no stripes, numbers, or anything, and they put that stuff in. But they actually cut out the yard line markers as stencils on white rug, and then they glue them in place. And we were just surprised. We just thought those would come from the factory pre-printed, you know, because this is a big organization. But a lot of handwork goes into this thing, and anyway, we're making good progress.
They are student athletes. This would be a good opportunity for them to do their math at the same time as they're playing football. Maybe
Yes,
get
well,
onto something.
we could be, but this is actually the installers that are doing it, so we hope they're all good at math and get that right. So anyway, this is coming along really nicely, and we're looking forward to having this in place. Another big event coming up, please put this on your calendar. The Maricopa Republican Club is hosting a fundraiser for Maricopa student scholarships and school supplies. It'll be Saturday, July 12th at the Duke Golf Course from 6 to 8 p.m. And as you can see, it is a must-attend event. And two good projects. They'd like to contribute to Rotary scholarships and school supplies through the upcoming school year. So if you can get that on your calendar and attend, that would be great. And I'm planning to attend that. And I think that's it. We'll come back and talk about these slides a little later. Oh, one more thing, actually. I meant to start with this. I do want to introduce... Sorry, time's up. I didn't have a clock going there. I would like to introduce two special guests tonight in the back row there. Sandra Park from Stiefel, Nicholas & Company. That's the public finance firm that we've worked with to make sure all of our numbers are correct on our override projections, and we'll have a chance to call on her later if there are more questions. And then Jim Giel from Gus Rosenfeld Law Firm has made sure that all of our resolutions meet all legal requirements. So I appreciate the two of them being here tonight, just in case there's any questions when we get to that portion of the agenda.
Okay, that brings us to governing board member reports. Anybody have anything? It's been quiet. It's summer. I'm on vacation mode. Nothing to report? Okay, moving on. Brings us to our work study items. Dr. Chestnut. We only have one thing. Mr. Roush. I don't know if you want Dr. Chestnut to introduce you, or? This is a review of our monthly financial report.
Thank you, President Anderson, members of the board. Dr. Chestnut, you've had a chance to review our monthly financial report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't have any questions. Anybody else?
Okay. Great.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
It's pretty thorough. Thank you, Mr. Roush. Item 6, consent agenda. Do I have any motions?
Move to approve consent agenda?
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Go ahead.
Second.
Second.
Can I ask a question?
You what?
Can I ask a question?
Not in consent,
Okay.
because it's already in consent. We would have had to pull it out in order to ask a question on an item. Does that make sense? Okay. So I still have a motion. Did I get a second?
Well,
Second.
Okay.
Yeah, Emery.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. and 1 abstention. Thank you, Mr. Bartle. Okay, yeah, during consent, if you want that item pulled out, we can do that during agenda approval. Okay. Good question. All right, item 7A, discussion and possible approval of expense voucher.
My company, so I'm going to recuse myself.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bartle. Okay, this is expense voucher 1453. Did anybody have any questions or motions on this item? I don't have any questions or clarifications. Okay, do I have any motions?
Motion to approve?
We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries with 1 abstention. 7B, Mr. Beckett. Discussion and possible approval of the personnel schedule, which includes resignations, reclassifications, terminations, non-renewals, non-position requests, new position requests, employment ratifications, stipends, leave of absence, FMLA requests, and any other administration actions.
Thank you, President Anderson, members of the board. You have the personnel schedule in front of you tonight. I can answer any of your questions at this time.
I only have one. When I look at some of the resignations, this is pretty late in the game to be resigning. Is it? Okay.
We are obviously never happy to see anybody go at this point in time, but our contract allows us to allow those people to go with your blessing, of course, as you approve. And again, we work through those liquidated damages fee, and we are collecting those fees as we move forward.
Are we still okay with hiring these positions? You know, these now open positions then? I mean, are we still ahead of the game on this?
Yeah, thank you, Member Coutray. We're actually still pretty good. As I've been saying all along, we were in a much worse shape the last few years than we are now.
Okay.
But again, any late hire is always a challenge, but I'm confident that we will be ready.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
You don't have as much gray hair as last year.
Right, it's all, I cut it off.
All right. Any other discussion or questions for Mr. Beckett? All right, any motions?
Move to approve.
I have a motion
Second?
and a second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Beckett.
Thank you.
7C, discussion and possible approval of the Health Services Staffing Plan for 2014-15. Dr. Chestnut.
We talked a little bit about this at our last meeting, and you know that we had an RN resignation, and that gave us the opportunity to consider doing something a little different with how we staff our health services positions. And we considered a couple different options, some more popular than others. And what I'm recommending and staff is recommending tonight is that we replace that RN position with a nursing aide. That'd be a 9-month position, 40 hours a week, salary range of approximately $22,027.5 with benefits, including benefits. That person would be full-time, obviously, and would basically then share 2 schools with the RN. So that we would have somebody in charge of health services at each school all day, and there would be plans for the RN to come over if more help was needed and that kind of thing. But we think this will work. The reason we're bringing it to you, even though it's a cost savings item, actually, because RN salary is much higher, it's a new model, and wanted to bring this to the attention of the board before we move forward on it.
Do we have to create a new job, or do we already have this job existing? Because it wasn't in the new position requests.
Typically, this will end up being a reclassification of the RN position that we have had. I may have to get back to you on that and have to look and see at our position. That's a good question that we probably need to make sure that we have an approved slot for them to go into. Yes, so we can look at that. If it's not, we'll certainly have that on the next agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Chestnut, I just have I guess more of a comment than a question. In looking around the area in other school districts, they use this model quite frequently, where they'll share an RN between schools in order to cut down their cost. in teaching, I've always taught at a school that just had a health aide instead of a nurse. Although I think that's nice for a nurse, but I think in this, I would like to see money put back in the classroom. So is this something we can look at district-wide?
This is something we'll be considering in the future, yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm just happy to see that all of our schools will be covered, because that was a concern for me. So, okay. So any other questions or discussion or motions? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. 7D, discussion and possible approval of additional funding for district-wide technology and additional funding to support the academic focus at all 9 schools. Dr. Chestnut.
I think you're pretty familiar with this agenda item. We've been talking about it for a while, and it really originated with the Budget Committee and was a recommendation from them that we move forward with those 2 expenditures, and that the board recommended to the board that those be approved. The $200,000 for district-wide technology needs, and then $300,000 for funding academic focus. As I've stated in the past, if this is approved, we're planning to work with the principals to make that academic focus funding last for about 2 years at least, and I think we need to do that. We had hoped, of course, the charter funding would continue, and it is not going to continue, and we would like to continue to improve and develop our academic focus at each school. So those funds would be necessary to make that happen, and I think we have a good plan for our technology needs, so recommend approval.
All right, any discussion or questions for Dr. Chestnut? Or motions?
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Chestnut. All right, that brings us down to item 7G. And this brings us to the hearing for our budget for fiscal year 2015. So as of, it is recommended that the governing board approve and hold a public hearing to get input from the public prior to the adoption of the 2015 budget. So this is now our public hearing. If there's anybody who would like to come up and address the board concerning this budget, please do so. All right, seeing that we don't have any takers to this podium, we will close the public hearing and move on to 7H. Discussion and possible approval and adoption of the 2015 budget. Dr. Chestnut or board members, any question or discussion?
I can just start. Obviously, the board does not have to approve the budget tonight. We could do that at our next board meeting. We just have to have it done by July 10th, I believe is the date, or is it the 15th? 15th. We think it's ready for approval and recommend its approval tonight. I just want to say that I am proud of the process we went through this year, and Mr. Roush did a nice job working with Mr. Irving and Rick Nielsen to have a good budget committee process. I think we had a lot of good discussion, and really, I think it was really a good way to hash out the issues. And we had a large number of people involved, and it led to some good discussion, and ultimately the recommendations you've seen over the last several meetings with academic focus being the most recent example, the technology tonight being the most recent example, but other things as well. So I think a lot of thought has gone into this, and we do recommend approval.
I do like the process. I think it worked very well as far as getting information to us. So thank you for leading that charge. All right, board members, any motions or discussion?
I have a couple comments. One on the process. I think we ought to consider in future years to have some initial conversation at the board level before we engage the budget committee, so that they have a taste of what's on the board's minds and what their priorities are. And then just a follow-up comment per my prior comments is just that we spent a lot of time, obviously for good reasons, talking about the expenditure increases due to our revenue increases. but I'm not pleased with the effort as far as trying to identify some expenditure decreases. I think there's always that opportunity, especially with an organization as large as ours, to find additional ways to cost cut and be more effective with and get more money into the classroom. Something we can improve upon, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Bartle. Any other comments or motions on this item?
I move that we approve the adoption of the fiscal year 15 budget.
Okay, I've got a motion
Second.
and a second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
One abstention, or one opposed, sorry, not abstention. I get it confused. Thank you, Mr. Bartle. All right. Moving on. Our last item that everybody is waiting with bated breath to talk about. 7I, consideration, discuss, amend if desired, and if deemed advisable, to adopt a resolution ordering and calling a special budget override election to be held in and for the district, and declaring the deadline for submitting arguments for and against the election to the Pinal County School Superintendent as of August 6th, 2014, by 5 p.m. With that, the floor is open. Dr. Chestnut, is there anything you would like to start us off with?
I do have some slides just to kind of review. They should look familiar to you. I just want to remind you about the Attitude and Opinion Survey that was conducted earlier this month, and I just want you to notice that you have the final copy at your place there, and the opinion survey itself, and then the demographics by precinct, which is kind of interesting data to look at. So if you really boil it down to what I think is the most important question in that whole survey, which there were quite a few, it's this one, and would you vote yes to approve the new budget override or vote no to not approve? And that actually was in relation to a 15% override proposal, and the answer was 57% yes. So that is encouraging. There is a margin of error on that survey of plus or minus 5.5%, so it could be much less than 57 or could be more. But that was a survey of registered voters in the city, and it's on page, the other interesting thing that's on page 21 actually was then at a lower rate, the follow-up question was, would you support it at 10%? And then the support goes up and comes in at 63% of the people that responded to the survey said yes to a 10%. They didn't ask the 5% question, but that's an interesting stat too that I think it's in that report that you have probably seen. So I just wanted to remind you about that. Then I want to remind you that we have the 4 different options, and did make some minor changes on these, which I've informed you about as we've gone along in the last week or so. But as you know, all 4 proposals are for 7 years, and that was a strong recommendation from the Override Recommendation Committee that we move forward with a 7-year proposal. And then we have options ranging all the way from 5% to 15%. And so, if you recall, the theory of the Override Recommendation Committee was to concentrate on increasing the number of teachers for to reduce class size, as well as add instructional technology. So if we did a 5% override, that would generate up to $1,525,000 per year. That would allow us to hire up to 22 additional teachers. And you also will remember that we wanted to designate some of those teachers for some of the programs that we want to improve. Our elementary gifted, art, technology areas, middle school honors, high school honors, and then 2 TOSAs, teachers on special assignment. We currently have 2 that are funded by the school district at the elementary level, and we have 1 that is funded by auction grant at the elementary level. But that's a crucial piece that we think could help support teaching and learning in our elementary schools. One new thing that from 2 weeks ago is, as we worked through this, we just realized that if we add that many staff, there is going to be a need for some additional support staff. Custodians, probably the best example, the possibility of adding an extra tech support person, but we would have to make a judgment about that. So it would be 3 support staff, and then instructional technology would allow us to continue at about the same pace that we've been the last couple of years to continue to increase that program. So that's kind of the flavor of all four of them, and depending on the percent, then the number of teachers goes up, which I'm sure that you recognize. And it just comes down to, I think, a judgment call by the board, whether it's 5%, 7%, which would add 33 teachers, 4 additional support staff, instructional technology, a 9%, which would add 44 additional teachers, 5 additional support staff, plus instructional technology, and then 15%, which would be like a big number, 78, and 7 additional support staff, instructional technology. So those are the 4 options, and I don't, oh yes, I do have one more slide. So just to give you the one-page review of that, working with Stifel, they've verified these numbers for us, that a tax rate per $100 of 10% assessed value. Now that is confusing language, but that is the language that's used on the ballot, which is also equivalent to the rate per 1,000, okay? You can do the math on that later, but trust me, that is the same. And so for a 5% override, that would be 65 cents per $100 of 10% assessed value, or 65 cents per 1,000 of assessed value, assessed by the county, not the fair market value. That would result in an annual tax of $65 on a $100,000 assessed value home. And that would generate, as I mentioned, $1.53 million, and so forth. You can see how that table works. So that's how the numbers break out. And I know that Senator Parks from Stifel or Jim Gill from the law firm would be happy to answer any more detailed questions, as well as Mr. Roush. So be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, who would like to lead off with questions or discussions?
I will.
Okay.
When I look at the instructional technology for all of the options, and you've just stated, like at the first option, the 5%, that would just be continuing on our same pace. But it doesn't really increase that much when you go into the other options. Wouldn't we want to increase that a little bit more so that, we're not at the same pace, we're actually accelerating a little bit?
I think there's room for discussion on that. The money, for example, that the board approved tonight, that's $200,000 for a technology budget for next year. That's in addition to their regular budget, which is $200,000 to $300,000. I don't have that memorized. It does allow them to do a lot of extra things. You'll recall the last time we looked at that, the technology numbers were higher. And just in wrestling with that, it's like, how much can we sustain? That's what we came up with. We would be happy to consider moving some money around if you would like to increase technology in one of the options.
Just not correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a next phase of this process at which we approve the language for the voter pamphlet, at which point we would want to clarify where we would invest the monies. So that's not something that we need to firm up today.
Tonight is just deciding on the amount. So, my thoughts on this, in talking to the community and hearing, actually just listening to what people have to say, is going with the conservative side, doing the 5% or the 7%. That keeps it under $100 a year, knowing that the city just increased the tax for the park, knowing that CAC has also increased their education tax. I want to be mindful of that, and I would rather have a win with a conservative amount than lose with going a high amount. Having been through this for the last, how many times, Mr. Bartle?
Too many.
5? Well, I would like to be conservative. I like option 2, 7%. It keeps it under $100, and it still gives us teachers to reduce class size, which is what this is all about.
A couple years ago, didn't the city raise taxes right before we
Yes.
went through this exercise?
Oh, yes.
On that, it's about a about a 61 cent increase, and it's only for 1 year. It expires on June 30th, 2015. If this is approved, this would begin collection on July 1, 2015. So there's some help there.
My fear is our funds will run out. This will be the last year for our funds. Unfortunately, the legislation is not supporting public education right now, so I would like to create local control, which is what I think this override would do, because then we can decide where the money goes. And I think that the community is here. I think the community is with us. We've done huge strides in the last 2 years. Thanks to Dr. Chestnut and the board, that's my concern, and that's my support, is for the option 2.
I agree that we should be conservative. I think that, baby steps are always better anyways, and so I think that it's much easier to go to the community and ask them for the lower end and, tell them what we're going to do with it and show them that, if they approve it, what we will do, and then, maybe later have more opportunities. So I definitely agree with being conservative, and I just struggle with the first 2 options in what the difference will be, and if it'll make a difference on our votes. If we went with 5, well, then I'd prefer 5, but we don't have that information. So it just makes it very difficult. Second, the other thing is when I was talking to legislators about the charter funding that they cut and trying to get them to not cut the charter funding, their biggest argument was, well, public schools can do overrides, so you guys don't deserve this additional funding. And that's what they said. That was their big argument. You can go get an override. And so they're basically telling us, we're cutting this, you need to go get an override if you want to continue, keeping your schools on pace and at a level. And so, I think that the legislature has forced us into an override situation by cutting the funds and telling us basically that's our only option. And I think that's going to be in the foreseeable future in terms of the legislature's attitude towards public education funding. And then finally, 75% of the districts in the state have overrides, and we have to compete with them, and that makes it very difficult, including the ones just north of us. So I think all of that, has to be taken into consideration when we consider this.
Would you address the impact this would have on class sizes and how that compares to our competition?
I would. I'd be happy to do that, yes. For example, the 5% option number 1, the way that breaks out is the 22 teachers, but 10 of them are designated as specialist-type positions. 12 would go directly to class size reduction, and I'm just guessing we'd probably end up allocating about 8 of those 12 to the elementary level. And if we did that, that would give us a K-6 class size average of about 25, which is a great improvement over what we currently have. And then there's more to it than that. When you have more specialists in the building, then you really have a better sharing of responsibility with teachers, right? So it makes lower class size obviously at the secondary level because you have those honors teachers. I didn't really calculate those numbers, but likewise at the elementary level, you just have more planning time for elementary teachers, which also helps their teaching load. So it's kind of a win-win. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 would drop class size to about 24.1, if you figure 12 of the 16 for class size reduction would go to the elementary level. So somewhere in that ballpark, and that starts getting, and that's just the K-6 number. And so the way that would probably work is, grades 5 and 6 would be a little higher, and kindergarten and first would be a little lower than that. So that would be the average for K-6 would be 24, roughly, for option 2. So good improvement, I think could help us a lot.
What's the magic number? I know lower is better, but there's a certain point where class size is no longer an issue. It's no longer a deterrent to student achievement.
The research says to really make those kinds of gains that you want with low class size, you have to get elementary class size down to about 16. So that's not feasible. But every little bit helps in that direction. We also know that class size is a huge issue with teachers. And if you looked at the survey, that issue resonates with voters, that they understand that there's a need for that. it's very common in Phoenix area, in the metro area, for districts to have this as the number one item. I know Scottsdale did on their last override. Number one item for their override proposal was reduce class size. So it ends up being a thing that people like as parents, and that is one of the reasons they make the choices that they do.
Schools because of the class size.
Yes.
Yeah. As a parent, that's what I look at.
Yes.
Competition. Do we know what their class ratio is right now?
I don't have those numbers. Mr. Roush, Mr. Beckett, do you have any of those numbers?
Because that's what we're competing with.
That's what we're competing against. We're competing against Kyrene with a 15% override and Tempe Union with a 10% override. So that is part of the unlevel playing field that we're competing on.
I know just from asking some parents who have students at some of the Kyrene middle, or not Kyrene, the elementary schools, Lagos and Pueblo, that their class sizes are right in that 25, 26 range. And obviously, I mean, it makes sense. They have an override, so they have class sizes in that range. You know, we're all, you know, we would definitely, I believe, be on much more of a level playing field in terms of class size, because we would have the override, or an override similar to what they have. But no, that's what parents who have kids there have told me. They're in that 25, 26 range. So.
I still think our best competition is ourselves. I don't think we're in competition with anybody else but ourselves.
Yeah.
And USD is great, and I think that we're going to need to keep becoming great, and to do that, we need an override.
And
So I would like to say option 2 is worth going for.
When I first started this process, when we first all started this process, I was go for the gusto. I really believe that we need to have the local control. I don't think that the legislators are going to support public education. I think they're going to do everything that they can to continue to take money away from it. And if we want to continue to grow, to be that A district. And this community likes things fast. They like to see fast results. That's why, you know, we get criticized a lot, because they don't see the growth. They don't see it happening right away. But I also understand, in light of what the city has voted to do now with the taxes, the feedback is, I don't think we would pass a 15%, but I do think we would pass a 9%. I really do, and I think that that would get us where we want to be in a very short period of time, which is what this community wants to see. They don't want us to they don't want us to take the slow route. They're not turtles.
Can you bring back the slides that compare what we gain? Yeah.
It's the last slide.
There's a 9% option right there.
Okay, and then can you go to 7? Okay. And then 5 real quick.
And 5?
Okay.
Dr. Chestnut, did primary consultants give us an idea of what impact each incremental step has on voter decisions?
A big picture sense that a 15% override was, or was it 57%? Yes. And a 10% goes to 63. And then they didn't ask the 5% or the 9% question.
As far as on a more global level, with all of these that they've done and all of these that they've analyzed, is there a magic number where for every 2% or every 5%, you're going to lose X percent of votes? Or?
I didn't get that opportunity to ask that question.
Is that something the consultant could answer?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm struggling between, obviously, a couple of different options, and really trying to dissect what we're gaining for what more we're asking for, and I think that's kind of the key. I really agree with President Anderson's comments about keeping it under 100. You know, that just initial shock value is so much less when someone looks at something, and I think there's got to be value to that at the ballot box for sure. It's just like pricing. When companies price things, they always, 99.99. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. There is data that proves that actually makes a difference. So, and I want to be successful. I think that's the key. We need to be successful for the community. We need this, and so.
If we do the option 2, that 7%, and we take more hits, I mean, that's 7 years. We can't go back to the voters until, what, 5 years in? 5 years in. So are we able to fund our district for 5 years if our funding gets cut? Can we maintain what we're doing now?
To maintain at this level with zero. I think
Well, I
think
get too.
we have to be mindful to not go from the needs to the wants. Our ultimate objective is how do we win an election? And intuitively, I don't know what the numbers are, but the higher the percentage, the less chance we have of winning this election. So
opinion survey that we had. I'm sure this was all conducted before that tax increase became the issue with, City of Maricopa. And so in a way, I'm wondering what the opinion would be out there with the public now, since they have increased that tax. I am, very much in favor of it between a 7 and a 9. I'm probably leaning more toward an option 2 than the 7%. I just would encourage people out there and the voters out there that even if you don't have kids in the school system, you're investing into your town and your community and improving it in every way by giving to the education and to the school district for this. So hopefully we can market this in such a way that, we can keep it low and people won't feel like they're being robbed and, completely dry of everything that they have with all these tax increases. Earlier before, I would have gone for a 15% or even a 9, but I'm leaning more toward a 5 or a 7. Maybe, what would a 10 do for us? I'm just, can we maybe, I don't know. It's just.
What's your recommendation?
Well, as you know, I would really like us to get this approved, and I'm a conservative person, so my recommendation would be a 5%. But also, I respect the discussion here, and but that would be my recommendation. While I have the floor, I just want to make one point of information. And if the board does approve an override, no matter what the percent, just to make it real clear in case somebody's watching on television or something, we're very cognizant of Arizona state law. And Arizona state law says that once the board approves an override, we can provide information to voters, much like this. We can't work on the Vote Yes committee during school time or with school resources, and the entire staff is very cognizant of that. But state law also says that we can work on the Vote Yes committee outside of school hours with our own resources and that kind of thing, and that's definitely what we'll do. I just want to reassure people that that would be the way we would proceed.
So you're confident with the 5% that we could continue to move forward with our academic goals and our strategic plan?
It would be an improvement over what we have in place for this school year, which is an improvement over last year. So it would continue that progress. I would have to admit that we could do more with the 7% and even more with the 9%. I would have to admit that.
a lot less with 0%.
A lot less with 0%.
Exactly.
On the difference between the 5 and the 7%, when I was reading that slide, is one of the differences that at the 7% level, there would be a potential for some sort of foreign language immersion. Is that the added thing? Oh, foreign language teachers, okay.
Yes, we're kind of looking into our crystal ball here, so there's the 7% proposal. I do think that obviously with the 5%, which I'm now showing, I mean, we have honors teachers at the secondary level. We have specialists at the elementary level. I think we're going to hire people that make the most sense. If we decide, a year from now, once this is approved, that, foreign language would make the most sense for us, I do believe this would give us the ability to do that even at the 5%. We need to come up with a staffing plan that makes sense like we do every year based on student interest and needs.
questions or motions?
I'd like to thank Dr. Chestnut for providing this information and with additional data. And all the hard work that the Maricopa Education Foundation is doing to contribute to this as well. I'd like to have more information about what our strategy is from a campaign perspective and our funding sources, and have a clearer picture. But this is certainly goes a long way to proving that this is a viable option for our school district and for our community, something that a month or two ago I would not have believed, especially given our track record. So I think, given the results of the survey, I think it would be irresponsible of us not to let the voters have an opportunity to make this decision. And I think we ought to do what our part to make sure that we're as conservative as possible, and we have put ourselves in the best position to win the election. And it is because of that that I will make a motion that we approve this at the 5% level.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. All right, we have a 5% override. All right.
We got it.
Thank you, Dr. Chestnut, for your
Thank you.
work. Thank you, Maricopa Education Foundation, for your work. All right, that brings us to item 8. Do I have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion. Is there a second? And a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. It is 7:23. Our next board meeting will be on July 9th.